Discover the best in local business news with a subscription to the IBJ and Inside Indiana Business. For a limited time, try us out for just $1 a week for 8 weeks. Claim this limited time offer now at ibj.com/trial offer.
A wife and a mother and a CEO or a senior level executive, there's this idea of being superwoman. You got to do it all and you got to do it well or you're failing. But we have to learn to take time out for ourselves.
That was Kristian Stricklen, president and CEO of the Madam Walker Legacy Center, talking about her career path leading to her becoming the keeper and protector of one of Indianapolis's greatest treasures. And this is IBJ's The Freedom Forum with Angela B. Freeman. So, Kristian, welcome to the Black History Month episode of the Freedom Forum. I'm so excited to have you here to discuss some real Indiana Black history as related to Madam C.J. Walker. However, before we get started, will you please tell our listeners a bit about you, your educational professional background, and any other factors that have led to you becoming the president and chief executive officer of the Madam Walker Legacy Center?
Well, thank you first, Angela, for having me. I'm very excited to be here with you and agree. What a great way to start off Black History Month. So I am Kristian Stricklen. I'm born and raised right here in Indianapolis, Indiana. Grew up in the Butler-Tarkington area. Went to private school earlier in my life, went to Holy Angels, but graduated from Broad Ripple High School. I'm a very proud Broad Ripple graduate. Rockets all the way. And then went to Jackson State University and finished at Indiana University. So have then, since coming home from Mississippi, I've been here in Indianapolis, actually started a career first in radio myself, and then that turned into public relations and spent over 25 years doing that. Most recently with Indianapolis Public Schools as their chief engagement and communications officer before starting at Madam Walker, and been at Madam Walker for almost 5 years.
Yeah, so I'm really pleased to have another Indianapolis native. I feel like so many of our guests, when I first started the show, were translocated to Indy like myself, but I have had a significant number of Indy natives, and I think that's awesome just to highlight the amazing talent that has been here, grown up here, and then stayed here, even if you left and came back. I think that's amazing. So let's start at undergrad. You talked about you went to Jackson State. I appreciate that, HBCUs, particularly Jackson State. We have a mutual friend, Robert Chagag, who is a deep, serious Jackson State alum. He loves it, all about Mississippi. And certainly during Black History Month, we want to highlight HBCUs, particularly because we appreciate historically HBCUs and their graduates have kind of been discounted or dismissed overall. And particularly, more recently, there's been a lot of highlight of the diverse students, the amazing talent that comes out of HBCUs, and HBCUs being a real opportunity to find diverse talent if you're looking for diverse talent specifically. So from that vantage point, I want to ask you, how did your time at Jackson State uniquely prepare you for the business world? And what unique skills or characteristics did attending a HBCU instill in you that you think may not have happened if you were in another institution? And then were there any disparate experiences between going to Jackson State and then coming back home and going to IU Indianapolis?
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely loved my HBCU experience, and I would be remiss if I didn't say, really first and foremost, how I even got there was through Circle City Classic as a junior in high school. And I just happened to attend the Circle City Classic that year, and Jackson State was playing in the game. And because of the college fair and things like that, I, was at that time really up in the air on if I wanted to go to college at all and then where. But HBCUs were not on my radar whatsoever. And after attending that game, I was already starting to really get interested in public relations as well as radio. And of course, Ball State is, the number one school in Indiana for that. And so I was looking into that and found out that Jackson State and Tennessee State both had really great, programs for that. Of course, Tennessee State, it was all about Oprah Winfrey, who is a graduate of that. So my mother took me on a college tour. And after visiting both, I just really felt like JSU was the place for me. And going there, it was everything from how they make you come to class prepared in the way you dress. It's like, it's not just throw anything on. They are preparing you for the business world. They are preparing you that we have to show up and we have to prepare ourselves to be not equal, but better every single day. And I loved, that experience. They would bring in different people all the time. So you don't have to wait to get an internship to have access to people who are already, working in the field at a national level, but to get that one-on-one time. There was a gentleman at the time named Jack the Rapper who used to have the largest music conference in the world. He was the Tom Joyner before Tom Joyner, and he came to my class. And I had opportunity to talk one-on-one with him. Those are things that I did not get, with coming back. And while I did enjoy, my experience, here back at IU, it was a difference. It's first and foremost a difference when you're looking to your left and your right and the people look exactly like you. So there's a level of not having to feel like you're always competing because everyone is on the same playing field, but we're all trying to do our best. When you're from Indiana and you don't have that HBCU experience, even though I went to a public school that was predominantly Black, at the time, it was just so different of knowing that everybody who's there are, excellent students that are trying to make a positive impact on their community, for the long haul. And being in a group like that is just, it's a feeling. I tell people all the time, I think that every African-American student should go at least 1 year.
I think that's amazing. I've heard that. I did not have that experience, and I don't even think, to your point, HBCUs were really on my radar when I went to college. But since that time, hearing the HBCU grads, they are so passionate about how it prepares you. Just like you said, it is beyond just academics. It's how you show up in the real world when you're not in the environment where everyone looks like you and what it takes to be deemed excellent in environments like that. So I particularly remember Robert talking about how, particularly if you don't have the confidence or you're not really comfortable, that HBCU experience really instilled that in him and made him ready to go into the business world. So I can appreciate how valuable that really is.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right that it will give you that confidence. I'd be lying. I have always been pretty confident in myself.
Yeah, me too.
But, you're absolutely right because it's like family, and really it is. I've some of my best friends, I met right there at Jackson State. My son's godmother, who lives here in Indianapolis now. Actually, she was my roommate, at Jackson State. And they wrap your arms, being all the way from little Indianapolis and all the way, from Jackson. That was a 12-hour drive. So it isn't, it isn't going to be a quick fix if I'm in trouble of any kind or need anything. Actually, my grandfather passed while I was there, but it was family from the very beginning. And as I said, it is an awesome experience.
Yeah, I love hearing about that and just want to take opportunity again to highlight that because, even because we are so north, I don't think that is the common experience. I want to be sure and highlight that, particularly during Black History Month. So you talked about majoring in business and marketing. My son is also going down that path, business, marketing, communications. And you talked about specifically public relations. Mm-hmm. And I think that's difficult. I think it's very difficult at a young age. We put so much pressure on young people to know what they want to do. I certainly had no clue what I wanted to do when I was just graduating high school and going to college. And I don't know that that's a realistic expectation. So part of what I want to know from you is, what were your career goals at the time you graduated? Did you have any idea what career opportunities were available to you at that time? And I'm talking about graduating high school or even college. And how did you get introduced to your first career opportunity focusing on your major? There's so much talk about going to college and focusing on getting a major and then getting a job that really has nothing to do with your major. So how did you get exposed to your first opportunity really focusing on your major?
Oh, yeah, that is absolutely true. And it is a funny story for me. So I did start off with radio and TV broadcasting. As I said, when I was at Jackson State, initially I went in wanting to be in television news. I had done some programming, here in Indianapolis while I was in high school that had kind of already started to prepare me for that. After getting into the classes, I realized, like we look at what's happening in our world right now, and I realized for myself, I am not the one that would want to be like first on the scene when there's a tragedy, sticking, a camera in someone's face and saying, "How do you feel?"
Right.
So it made me have to think about, I wanted to stay in the field, but what should I do? And the entertainment side of it is what actually interested me more. And so I changed from television to radio. And I got an internship with the Jackson State radio station, WJSU. So that was my first internship. And then when I came back to Indianapolis, I was working part-time at Bank One. And Guy Black, who was a morning show host on the Radio One channel here, happened to come through the drive-thru. And
Wow.
I was cashing his check. And when I sent him his cash, I wrote him a note and said, "My name is Kristian, and I want to be on the radio. Can you help me?" Because all he can say is no. He called me that night and told me to be at the radio station at 6 a.m. the next morning. And I was there. And he let me be a guest co-host.
Wow.
And Linda Clemens was his co-host at the time. So there were several times after that he allowed me to be his co-host when she was out of town or somewhere else. And so that was the first step. And from there, I was offered when WTLC was purchased by Emmis Communications at the time, I was the first person to get what they call their Bright Star internship. It was an internship for African Americans that were looking to go into radio. And it was amazing because it gave me the opportunity to learn radio inside outward. So over an entire semester, not just on air, I got to learn every single department. And after that, I was hired on part-time. And it just wasn't, quite frankly, just wasn't enough money. And but I really, really, really wanted to, really do the on-air piece. And it wasn't happening fast enough for me. And a friend of mine just at that time, I just needed some extra money. And so she had told me about a woman named Wanda Wills who owned her own PR company. And it just happened to be located in the Indiana Black Expo building. So I went and had a conversation with her, really just about a part-time job. And really, after that, it's so funny that the rest is history because I knew about marketing. I hadn't really, really understood what PR was. But at the time, it's like, I'll do whatever because I just need the money. And I did not realize how everything else that I had done up to that point, the writing skills, the connections that you make, all those things that were already playing in to what PR, really is, that I was ready for it, even though I didn't know. And so I started working for her and worked for her for a couple of years until I was asked to apply at Black Expo.
So There's so much in that story, so many nuggets I want to highlight. Number one, just your gumption to tell Guy Black, "Hey, I'm trying to come to the radio station,"
Yes.
and that made it happen. So, what the kids say these days, shoot your shot.
That's
Like
right.
I like that. And to your point, all he can say is no, and I absolutely believe that. But also, really getting to know. You talked about I got to learn the radio station from the inside outwards. And what you're talking about is the business side of it, right? Not just the entertainment side,
Correct.
but really the business side. And even in legal, where I am, I appreciate that because there is much more to being a lawyer or an entertainer or whatever the case may be than just doing the law. There's the business side of whatever business or industry you're in. And that's critical.
Absolutely. Yes. It was the sales department. It was the production department. It was the promotions department. Yeah. It's all of it. It was absolutely everything.
I really appreciate that. So you clearly, so I don't think I appreciated you had all this kind of background and experience in entertainment before you kind of made a transition into what I learned or saw, which was more the nonprofit sector and the educational sector. So I want to know, how did that jump happen? How did, after being amongst all the people in the entertainment side, how did going working with the kids and the nonprofits, how did that keep you stimulated and motivated? And then, what really drove that change first? Let's talk about that.
Well, so I think first of all, because I did work at Indiana Black Expo for 4.5 years, which is a non-profit, right?
Right.
And so while definitely it's known as well for its entertainment side, there were so many other things that, youth and family programs was always, and I believe still is, a huge part of what that organization was about. And so I had the opportunity to work under Reverend Williams, who had been the first and longtime president at IBE, and then under Joyce Rogers. And so while doing that, not only did I did lead like all of the celebrity logistics. So I'm the person who made sure that everybody who came in got where they needed to be and were seen. So I got a chance to do that. I did all of the media relations, so I made sure that everybody knew what was going on. But in addition to that, there was an HIV program with the State Department of Health that we partnered with Jalen Rose when he was here on. There was the program and partnership with the Damien Center. And so I was the person who also, led those things for the organization as well. After doing it, though, for about 3 or 4 years, I was ready for something else. I wasn't necessarily ready to leave Indianapolis. And so I actually applied and was hired at Borshoff, which is one of the largest public relations firms here in the city. And so being at a PR firm gave me the opportunity to work on a variety of things all at one time. And so from the beginning of starting there, I had clients such as what was Eskenazi now, but was Wishart, then a bank out of West Virginia. We worked on Starbucks. We worked on a couple of educational, programs. And some colleges and universities. And so it gave me the opportunity to really hone the craft of PR and apply it accordingly, depending on, no matter really what the topic was. And so, and that was really, really, helpful to me. I did that for another 4 years or so and got the opportunity to lead communications for McDonald's in their co-ops in both Louisville, Kentucky, as well as here in Indianapolis. And so that was then really transitioning into not just a for-profit, but, the largest fast food chain in the world. And there's a whole lot of particulars that go along with that. And also having the opportunity to work very closely with their national team, which you do, and so it really gave me a chance, to do that. At that time, after that, I had my son, who is the joy of my life, but also was early. So he was premature about 7.5 weeks. And so I took a little bit of time, with him. And we did learn later that he is on the autism spectrum. And so I was looking to do something that was going to be a little bit slower. And a former board member from Black Expo had just come back to town and was leading the marketing for Kiwanis International. And so she had asked me to come and work with her. So it gave me an opportunity to, really work at that time somewhere that was like really within a mile of where I live, but still get the opportunity to work on things from an international perspective, which is a nonprofit. There were partnerships that we did with UNICEF. So there was some traveling, but not as much as, what I had to do before. But it did give me, the opportunity to learn now outside of just even from an African American perspective, but what nonprofit, life really is. But I tell you, it's been my entire journey. It's all been relational because even after doing that, a client that I had at Borshoff had asked me to come and work with him at United Way. And so I did, and I got an opportunity to work on some public advocacy campaigns that they were doing around early childhood education and the importance of making sure that some of our private early childhood centers are up to par as the public child care centers are. And as a parent, my son was at preschool age. So this was something that was very personal.
Right.
I knew it firsthand. And then it was also right around the time that we were learning about his disability. And so that's a whole other challenge, of making sure that he's in a quality setting. So it was very personal, but it gave me the opportunity to still take those communication skills and figure out how to, promote it from that perspective. And that had more political background, to it. That was an area that I had not, really been involved in at that time. Did that. And then again, got the opportunity to go work for Eastern Star Church. And I did that for about 2 years, but we did a complete rebrand of the church, that is over 100 years old, but was just looking for a whole new refresh. And then also I did some work, on my own, and I work with some other independent contractors. So I've had the opportunity to work with the City County Council, and then I got the opportunity to go and work for Indianapolis Public Schools. I will tell you, I was not necessarily interested in that at first because I was really looking at it like I didn't really want to go and have to work in a school. Had no idea of what it really looked like to work at the district level.
Right.
But it was really a really good experience. During my tenure there, we had recreated the community engagement arm. At the time, that was what we were hearing from families. The public relations side, that marketing side, I think that's okay, but the students and the families, they need to feel some type of engagement, right? And so it's like, how is the district helping all of the schools to be able to really, really, touch these families? They need to see you. They need to know. And so we created an entire community engagement program that they still have to this day.
You know what that just taught me was I don't think I've ever appreciated that what I just heard from you is literally every organization, basically, has some type of marketing, PR person or team involved. I don't think I've appreciated that or would ever know that.
Yeah.
And that's from nonprofit and for-profit.
That's right.
And when I think about for-profit PR, I think about you're in trouble, you did something wrong, and now you got to go clean it up, right? But it sounds to me like it's very much just a function of getting your message out. So what I want to ask you is, what did you learn, if anything, maybe it's all the same, in marketing and PR for your nonprofits as compared to for-profits? Or is it all just different positions on the spectrum.
Yeah, I really think it is. I mean, I think everybody wants to make sure that whatever their message is, that is heard. And that message can change, depending on what the, whatever's going on at that time or what the topic is. You can have multiple messages, within one organization. It just really, just kind of depends on what's going on. Like you said, there's the business aspect of it. But especially, like within nonprofits and even, like at the Madam Walker, right? Like, so there's the business aspect of it. But then there's also the community engagement, piece of it. And I think really learning, first of all, that nothing is one dimensional in life, right? And so you have to approach it, that way. And you always have to keep it going because it's not a one-time thing. You've got to be able to stay engaged with people, and you've got to, and that can mean a multiple, of things. It depends on what your target audience, is. I learned a lot about that, like at my time with, McDonald's in a way that I hadn't thought about, before. But you break it up. What may be important to you and I, teenagers aren't going to care as much about.
Right.
But if I need to get teens engaged, how do I message to them? And it's going to be a different message, and it's more at the core it might be the same, but but I've got to approach them where they are.
Yeah.
You have to speak to people exactly where they are, and then you bring them along.
So I have two questions before we kind of transition to actually talking about the Madam Walker Legacy Center and Madam Walker herself. But you had a lot of jumps. You had a lot of roles in that 25 years.
Yeah.
So I want to know, for those people who may be considering moving or lateraling, or, how did you know a good move was a good move? Did you make a move that wasn't necessarily a good move once you got into it? And more importantly, how do you feel that all those roles really prepared you to be a CEO right now?
Yeah. So, one of my closest mentors told me a long time ago, you should really kind of rethink where you are at least every 5 years. And it doesn't mean that you got to move on, right? But you might want to just do some self-reflection at that time. You need a couple of years when you're in any role to really be able to master it. And then after you've kind of gotten the basics down, then you need to really look to see, what will this continue to offer me,
right?
Or not. I had, a lot of great opportunities that, because I made great relationships with people along the way, that most of the time I didn't have to go looking. People came to me and asked me to come. And if I thought, based off of what was going on in my life overall, and even what it looked like for me financially, of, if it was going to be, maybe a good opportunity to move. I did one time, I jumped more so from the marketing side, because that was something still within the fast food area. I was like, well, let me try this. And I realized I did not enjoy that as much as I did the PR side. And I feel like that's okay, because it's just as important to know what it is you don't like to do as it is for you to know what you do like to do.
That's exactly right.
And what you're really good at and what you might not be as good at, especially if it's something that you're not really enjoying. And so, I feel like you have to enjoy what you do for you to do it well. You're not going to like it every day. That's not life. But for the most part, you need to enjoy, what it is that you do. So
now it's time for a break.
Get caught up on the state's top business news every business day with the Inside Indiana Business Radio On Demand podcast. Available now at InsideIndianaBusiness.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
We're back with Kristian Stricklen, President and CEO of the Madam Walker Legacy Center, on this Black History Month episode of the Freedom Forum with Angela B. Freeman. As I tell kids, law students, high school students all the time, it is as important for you to know what you don't like to do. So any opportunity to learn is a good opportunity, even if you learn, okay, I don't want to do that anymore,
right.
or I don't want to work with them people, or I don't want to
That's
work
right.
for that organization or whatever. That
Mhm.
helps give you direction on where you actually do want to go. So
Yeah.
that's very important. So
Yeah.
thanks for highlighting that. Okay, so let's move on to Madam Walker. So you're now almost 5 years into your role as the leader of the Madam Walker Legacy Center.
Mhm.
So I want to know, you talked about, how those roles prepared you.
Mhm.
I want to know a little more personally, what unique qualities or characteristics or skills do you believe you possess that empower you to be successful to date, that has empowered you to be successful to date? And then what successes have you had in your role as the CEO of Madam Walker Legacy Center that you're really proud of and want to highlight? And what do you see going forward? What does the future look like?
Yeah. So, first, I was a board member with the Madam Walker Legacy Center. And prior to being a board member, I was a consultant with Madam Walker Legacy Center. Well, before, when it was still considered Madam Walker Theater Center.
Right.
And the board at the time they were in the process. So I was a consultant when they were in the process of creating the strategic plan that then actually ended with us being able to get the $15 million grant from the Lilly Endowment to restore the space. So I was there when that was being discussed. What needs to happen to sustain this space so that we don't lose this gem? Because we were there, right? And so after being a consultant, when I joined the IPS team, then I was asked to be a board member. So I was a part of that, and as part of the board, I led the marketing committee.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was able to help to market that. And then of course we had COVID, and during the time that of COVID was actually when the Netflix special on Madam Walker had came out. So I think first and foremost, with the movie coming out, but then also it ended up coming out right at the time when the world stood still.
Right.
It really helped, I think, across the whole world for people to really, truly appreciate who she was.
Yeah, yeah.
And then, of course, for us here in Indianapolis to really appreciate the gem, that we had. When I applied for that position, it was really more of a faith jump for myself. I was at IPS. I was not unhappy. But as I said, I'd been there about 4 years. And it gave me the opportunity it was a little bit of a stretch because while I had been on executive teams, I had never been the CEO. And so, again, one of my mentors always taught me about transferable skills. And so I was like, well, I'll just try it because I really don't have anything to lose.
That's right.
If I don't get it. Excuse me. And so, once I did get it, I was scared, obviously, because now there's been so much investment,
right,
into this organization, and it means so much to the community, and it means so much to me. I grew up here, so I've always known about Madam Walker, that it's like it's all kind of on your shoulders, right? Like that it's make it or break it time. And so, yeah, I mean, I feel like God really blessed me with some opportunities where we were in the process of figuring out what are we going to do. We knew that we needed to create some new programming. It had been some programming that had been around. We had started with some consultants that are now on full time during the COVID years of doing some programming in a virtual sense. But we had to look at that as everybody was ready to, break out and get back to, somewhat of a normal life of how do we transition all of the virtual programming back into in-person programming, and what will live on, what will sunset, and how do we really re-engage, the community? Because it's one thing to say we want to save it, but it's something else, right, to really get truly engaged into it. And Mike Epps called and said, I'm going to do my next Netflix special in my hometown. And he wanted to do it at the Madam Walker. And so we had started doing some hybrid. This was still 2021. So,
Right.
We weren't fully out of the weeds,
Right.
for COVID, but it was something that he really wanted to do. And so we said, of course. We were also already working with the Cultural Trail, and the Cultural Trail coming in front of the Madam Walker. A previous administration of the Walker had a version of a Walk of Fame that had some local community members that had been given a star. And we had already had the conversation with the Cultural Trail that was something that we wanted to keep. And so we said, absolutely, we'll work with you on this. And we want you to be the next person that we add to the Walk of Fame. And he said, absolutely. And so what was scheduled to be 2 shows sold out in 3 days, and 2 additional shows were added. And so in November of 2021, we had 4 sold out shows and are now a part of a Netflix special that I'm definitely proud of, because I think I was just looking the other day on Netflix, because he has a new special. And sometimes from time to time, I'll just go on there, because you can click on Indiana Mike and the first thing you see is the iconic Walker Theater sign, in perpetuity. That's a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
That's a blessing. And that wasn't even our grand reopening.
Right. Right.
And so, but it definitely helped, put us on the map. I think it really helped because obviously there's a strong partnership, with Indiana University. There's a lot of, I think, misinformation about, does the university, own the Walker, because they do own so much of the property around there. They don't. The Walker owns the Walker, but the Walker is a partner, and they should be, because they're a neighbor.
Right.
So we should be partners, but this was an opportunity for the Walker to step out on its own. And, to let the community know that the team at the Walker is qualified, and can bring that old feeling. That's really what people, you think about the nostalgia of what the Walker has always meant. And that we can bring that, back in this day and age and start making new memories. And so that was really the kickoff for it. We were able from that to start really raising money for what would be our grand reopening and our 95th anniversary. We were able to bring in Babyface, who's also another hometown, person. We put him on the Walk of Fame as well. And so that the response that we got from that was so great that it then became what we now call our annual, fundraiser, which is Legacy Fest, which happens every year around the Juneteenth timeframe. That was not a strategy that we started with, but it became a strategy, just because of the response that we got from, the community. And that's the business community, as well, because they could see that, okay, the Madam Walker is getting stronger. They are doing the right things to become more sustainable. And we were able to continue to build out our programming. So it made us, I think, be more attractive when we're going after grants, that people trust now that they can, give us those dollars and that we're going to do the right things with those dollars. And we have. And that's also what the benefit of the partnership with the university had been, because they're like our property manager. They take care of the day-to-day. I don't have to worry about if the boiler is broken, figuring out how to get it fixed. They handle that so that my staff and I can really and truly focus on, programming. And so, year over year, we've been able to really look and see, we have a program I'm really proud of called Legacy Leaders. And it's a civic engagement program because, of course, we do things around entrepreneurship. She was an entrepreneur and she was a philanthropist. And we do have programming, around that, but so do so many other organizations.
Right.
And what we really try to do is kind of cut through the clutter and figure out when you think about the Madam Walker Legacy Center, what do they do?
Yeah.
There's the Walker Theater, and we all know about the Walker Theater or have heard stories, from family members about their time and their day of going to the theater or hanging out and partying in the ballroom. And that's very important. But when you think about us as a not-for-profit and you say, well, what is it, like that they do? We do civic engagement programming. We do entrepreneurship programming through Motivate Her. We also have our Summer Institute, which is STEAM programming that's hybrid. That was one of the programs because we had gotten international attention for it that we have figured out a way to do it in person and online, at the same time.
Yeah.
And so those are the things that are, I'm very proud of being able to do that in less than 5 years.
I am so impressed. I didn't know all this. And I certainly didn't know that this real momentum happened basically in the last 5 years, like since COVID. That's so impressive. And it is particularly impressive because the ability to sustain such a monument to Madam Walker and what that looks like in 2025 and 2026 as compared to when she was here. So let's talk about her because I don't want it to be lost. I must believe there are people listening or will listen to this who don't exactly know who Madam Walker was. Obviously, she is a major institution in the African American community in Indianapolis and well beyond. But I don't know that the general business community may know who she is. So let's talk more about the woman and her amazing legacy in Indianapolis. So will you tell us about Sarah Breedlove or Madam C.J. Walker and why she's so important and such a Black history maker in Indianapolis?
Yeah, so Sarah Breedlove was the youngest child of her parents that was born in Louisiana. She was orphaned early in age and then raised by her sister and her sister's husband. That was not the best situation, and she ended up getting married at 14 years old, and very soon after that had her one and only child, Alelia. Ended up moving to the St. Louis area with two of her brothers were already living, and they were barbers. And so she would help out in their barbershop, cleaning up, and then also was a washerwoman, which was a pretty typical role for Black women, especially during that time. She, like a lot of women at that time, from stress as well as really lack of hair care, really options, lost her hair and had ended up running into another woman who had a product that really helped her to get her hair back. The truth is, because this is a kind of turning point if you watch the movie, was that she actually ended up working for her and was one of her best sales agents and ended up leaving St. Louis and then going to, I believe, Denver, Colorado. And it was during that time that she started tinkering around with making her own product, more so because of the smell of it. So it works, but it didn't smell the best. And so she, on her own, just started to figure out how, she could maybe make something that could be a little bit better. And she did figure it out. And that became her first product, which was the Wonderful Hair Grower. She started to market that. She had married while she was in St. Louis. She had married for a second time and divorced, and then ended up meeting C.J. Walker, who was a marketing guru. And so together they started to promote Wonderful Hair Grower. And the idea then was for her to name it after herself, because Madam, of course, meant Mrs. Mrs. C.J. Walker. And that's how Madam C.J. Walker was born. So she actually left the Colorado area and moved to the Philadelphia area to help to really get her product off the ground, and then decided to move to Indianapolis because we are the heartland, and it was really more because it was a better place for distribution of the product. And so that's really how she got here in Indianapolis. And then once she got here, she really, it worked exactly what she, planned to do because she was able to distribute the product at a higher level. And it made her be the first self-made, female millionaire in the country. She became a philanthropist. She was a faithful member of a AME church. She made the first $1,000 donation to what was then the Senate YMCA, which was the first African-American YMCA, here in Indianapolis. She continued to grow, her business really worldwide. Her daughter ended up moving to the New York area, specifically the Harlem area. And she then wanted her mother to come, and move there with her. That was during that Harlem Renaissance time. Here, while still here, she had attended in her off time, she liked to go to the movies, and she attempted to go to the movies at another movie house here in town who tried to charge her a black tax. So imagine being a millionaire and still not being good enough to enter just because of the color of your skin.
Mm-hmm.
She did decline to do so. She also sued, and she won
Mm-hmm.
when she sued. It was there, though, that the vision for the Walker Theater was really born. And so, but not just for it to be the theater, but also a space for African-American owned businesses. So she then did, though, move to Harlem. So while it was best for her business to stay here, she chose not to. And so they moved to Harlem, and then she eventually built a mansion right outside of the city of New York City, which still, of course, stands, today. Madam died in 1919. And this is something that I talk a lot about, especially with my staff. Right now, I always call them my all-girl band. But I think it's so important because she died at 51 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you think about, yes, she did a lot of wonderful things.
Right.
And she overcame so much, and she didn't really get to live to enjoy it, because she died of hypertension. And so, that's something that we're looking at of, now, as additional programming as to, what do we need to do? Because, I think that all of us, not just women, but, if we're talking specifically, like about women, that we have to learn to balance,
Mm-hmm.
So we do some of that with some of our motivator programming, and we have an annual luncheon, and it really focuses on senior level women because, we all have stresses, but of course, when you are potentially, a wife and a mother, and a CEO or
Right.
a senior level executive, there's this idea of being superwoman. You got to do it all, and you got to do it well, or you're failing. And that in itself, of thinking about failing is stress, but we have to learn to take time out for ourselves. And, really, there's a lot of conversation right now around self-care, and it's so important because, we celebrate this person, and we should, but she didn't live, to see it through. And when she died in 1919, her daughter jumped right in and wanted to make sure that this last vision came to fruition, and she was able to do that, which is why we were able to open in 1927. But then she died in 1931. So she also, died very early.
Yeah.
And didn't get to really see, everything through to fruition. And I think, we do a disservice when we don't tell that part of the story.
That's right.
Because it's so important. But thankfully, through it all, here we are. We're 99 years later, and we're still on that corner. We are the pillar of Indiana Avenue. And regardless of whatever else has changed around us, we're still there. And I'm so happy and just privileged in so many ways to be able to lead that organization and, not just remember the past, but now we're making new memories so that, those that'll come, behind us, 100 years later, we'll be able to talk about, what all we did to help to keep it going.
It is so powerful what you're saying. I'm 51 right now. 51, and I feel pretty daggone young. And to think that, she died at this age, having done so much, is just is mind-boggling. Also, one of the things I want to highlight, you did an exceptional job, because I did my research on Madam Walker before I came up in here. You did an exceptional job telling that story, and I guess as the CEO, that's part of your role. But one of the things I want to highlight is that not only did she get rich, but she employed almost 20,000 women across the country to be able to sell these products and also make a living for their families. And, so she is the epitome of lifting as we climb, right? Like Absolutely. She came up and brought everybody else up with her. Now, I will tell you, one of the things that has always boggled my mind as a patent attorney, I'm a patent attorney, about Madam Walker's story is whether she held a patent. And I did some research on this, and actually she herself did not hold a patent, but Marjorie Joyner, who I assume is the daughter you mentioned, is that right?
No.
Okay, so who is Marjorie Joyner?
I'm not sure who Marjorie Joyner is, yeah.
Well, she was certainly part of she was part of the manufacturing company, she was part of the business side, but she applied for a patent. I looked it up. It's U.S. Patent 171617 for scalp protector. And it was issued and assigned to Madam C.J. Walker Manufacturing Company. It was granted in 1929. So you said that's 10 years after Madam Walker died, but you also said that's a couple years before her daughter died.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting to me. One of the thoughts I've always had is, if she was able to do all that she did and make all the impact that she was able to make without ever having a patent, how much more rich would she have been if she actually had the 20 years of exclusivity that, having that patent would have had. So I just always thought that was very fascinating. It's something that I've always thought about and just looked it up. And she did get a patent, but part of that may be just the time we're talking about, right? These are the 1800s to the early 1900s, right? I mean, goes back to a time she's a millionaire still getting charged a black tax. So maybe she wasn't aware that patenting was an opportunity. Maybe she couldn't find maybe she couldn't find a patent attorney who would take her on as a client as a Black woman. Who knows what could have been happening? But that's, again, these are the nerdy things I think about as a patent attorney. Anyway, so going beyond preserving the history and the legacy of Madam C.J. Walker herself, I want you to tell us, why is the Madam, and I think you've already done this, but why is the Madam Walker Legacy Center so important to Indianapolis? And again, as you look to the future, what are some of the goals that you want to see the center be able to do?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, why it's so important to Indianapolis is, well, and it is, we are a national our space.
Yeah, sure.
Our space is a national historic landmark. And I think that that's so important because she did live, like in some other places, but she made such an impact, here in Indianapolis. And the Walker Building, is the receipt of that.
Yeah.
That she was able to make such an impact beyond, as you said, she absolutely lifted up and made not just herself a millionaire, but so many other women. But then she left us, like this space. She created a space so that in so many ways, we none of us had to worry about paying a black tax again.
That's exactly what she did.
Yeah.
When she went to that theater, she's like, okay, this won't happen again.
That's right. I always say it was FUBU before FUBU.
Yeah.
Or us by us, right?
Yeah.
But not just from an entertainment perspective, but, to be as thoughtful as to build a 4-story space that's a block long that has so many offices that became the space to Black dentists and doctors.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the distribution, company. And even today, while we're there, Asante Children's Theater, is still there. And so it is it's a strip mall too.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about what was a strip mall, but there was a pharmacy, there was the Coffee Pot Lounge, which was a restaurant. So when you think about that, there's office space, there's movie theater, there's pharmacy, there's restaurant, there's hair salon, and it's all in this, one beautiful building that she wanted us to not be able to have a space of our own to entertain ourselves, but to also to create, further businesses, even outside of her own.
Yeah.
In so many different ways. To be that thoughtful,
Yeah.
Gosh, it makes me wonder, did she realize what she was really doing and that here we are 100 years later
Mm-hmm.
and it would still be standing? I think that what my main goal would be for the future would be the sustainability of the walker. It has definitely had its own checkered past. But I think that the things that we're trying to do this time is to make sure that there is sustainability. Nonprofits have a hard time.
Right.
And I think we see that every day now, that a lot of people are struggling. And it's not easy. I'd be lying if I said it is. But I think really focusing on ourselves and doing the best things for the Madam Walker. And we have a very committed board that understands, where we've been and that what we need to do to make sure that we actually have a future. It has been, really just one of it will always be probably one of the best things I could have ever done, in life, to know that we are doing the right things.
Mm-hmm.
We just announced an $8 million endowment. That's a hard thing for any nonprofit, especially a Black nonprofit, to do. In the big scheme of things, that's not a lot of money. It is a start. And the goal is, for it to, continue to multiply. It is, though, a statement that the Madam Walker is investing in itself,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that we want to make sure that we're doing, the best things. We, yesterday, also held our sky-breaking event for our rooftop space, which was actually always a part of the strategy with the restoration. But because the deferred maintenance on that building was so great, it had to kind of be put on the back burner for a while and was a phase 2. So while we have raised money for our programs and the events that we have, we've also at the same time raised dollars so that we could, again, reinvest in ourselves. And there will be programming, that will happen, on that rooftop venue. But one of the things I think is important is that while we are not for profit, we are also a venue. We do have a theater, we have meeting space, we have a ballroom that is rentable. And that is, again, part of the great, partnership that we have with the university, is that there are dedicated team members that are in our building every day. They work for the Walker. And IU is paying for that, for them to work for the Walker, to focus on that part so that my small team can focus on, really continuing to build out what we need to from a programmatic standpoint. But to be competitive, rooftops, we see them pop up if we go out of town. We see, it's the thing. We know that from a tourism perspective, that when other organizations come and we have and through Visit Indy, we know that we have an amazing team, and they've done a great job of making us the best convention, city in America. And those conventions want to do things even outside of the convention center. And rooftops are something that they always ask for. And so we are an intimate space through and through, but we are still a part of, downtown Indianapolis. And it's important that if we want to be an option when people are looking to have, whether it's a meeting, a party, a wedding, a reception, a corporate, engagement, whatever, that if we want to be an option, that we must be able to be competitive and offer the same things that they can get somewhere else. Otherwise, they're going to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And when we do that, then we are again reinvesting in ourselves, because those are additional dollars that come back into the organization. And then that goes back into our programming. And that's how you become sustainable. We've got to invest in ourselves so that we can continue to move forward.
Again, I'm just so moved. I thought I knew a lot about, but maybe it's your passion that's conveyed. I'm just so fired up about this center and what it truly means for this city. It's our Tulsa, Oklahoma, our Black Tulsa, like the little venue that allowed the doctors and the lawyers and the Black, professionals and business people to thrive in a time where they didn't have opportunities to sit in other spaces and places among, the community. And it should be protected and sustained and invested in. I love that Mike came back, and hyped it up in a place, to your point. What better marketing pitch could you get than everybody sitting at home during COVID and seeing this movie about Madam Walker? So as we begin to wrap up, I guess what I would ask you is, as the Walker continues to look for partners and opportunities, I have met Miss Alayla Bundles, many times, the great-great-granddaughter of Madam C.J. Walker. I've gone to a exhibit at the Indiana Historical Society all about Madam C.J. Walker. What can the community do to continue to make sure we lift up not just her, but her legacy and all that she stood for, to make sure that it's not just history, but it continues to move forward going into the future?
Yeah, I think, just continue to support us, right? That's financially support us. I always say there's time, talent, and treasure. We are a not-for-profit, so we are always in need of volunteers. I have a staff of 5, myself included. So we are always in need of volunteers. And so, reach out to us. We're always looking for that. Find a program that may be of interest, to you. It's also, and participating in those as well. It's participating in the programs that we have yourselves, bring your children, around as well. There are a lot of educational opportunities, that we have. So continue to, just engage. I would say, share the information, with your family. What we don't want to do, and I think sometimes we all do, is that we can drive down, Martin Luther King or across Indiana Avenue, and we can, take pride. Like I said, you see those iconic Walker, that Walker Theater sign and know, yep, that's here. And we sometimes take advantage, that we have these gems, and we don't think about it until it's too late.
Yeah.
And then we want to be all up in arms. What happened? What's this? What's this? And we all have to do our part, not just to save things, but to keep it going.
Yeah.
So I think that's what I would say is just, I think we've had a lot of great engagement. I would say keep it coming. We're going to continue to develop, more and more programming. And, we are in our 99th year. So we have a centennial year coming up. There's going to be a lot of opportunities to be engaged. And I would say, reach out to us and figure out how can you. This is for us, by us. And so it's going to take us to keep it going.
Yeah, I have had the pleasure of being up in all kind of spaces, and I feel like at the Walker, and I feel like every time I come, I kind of discover a new, like, I didn't know this was here. It's a large building. It holds many different opportunities to do many different things, but have had some of my best experiences in that building and in the theater, in the ballroom, so many different places. It's just a beautiful space. And it gives the sense of history and nostalgia, and you walk in and feel like you've come someplace, right? And that's a beautiful feeling, and to appreciate all the history that truly does go along with that. So I just want to thank you for being here today. Thank you for sharing one of our greatest Black history makers and trailblazers and ceiling breakers, Ms. Madam C.J. Walker, and keeping her legacy alive in that center. Thank you for all you and your staff, strong but mighty, small but mighty, do to keep it going. The board, all the people, we really appreciate it. And if you haven't been there, you certainly should go and visit, because it's absolutely beautiful.
And I was going to say that, I think, we want to make sure everyone knows this is a place for everyone.
Yeah.
And we know that she is definitely a Black history maker, and the building is as well. But we invite everyone to come and to experience all of the wonderful things that we have.
Yes, and there's a lot to offer. So, Kristian, thank you for being on this Black History Month episode of the Freedom Forum. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again to Kristian Stricklen, and thanks to you for joining us on this 55th episode of IBJ's The Freedom Forum with Angela B. Freeman. Please come back next month for another conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion in the Central Indiana business community.
Off the Record with Indiana's 250 most influential business and community leaders is a podcast that peels back the curtain on Indiana's most respected leaders, one episode at a time. Go beyond the headlines and hear the stories of grit and innovation that shape these leaders. Do you want to know who's driving our state forward? This is a must listen. Subscribe and listen wherever you get your podcasts or at ibjpodcast.com.
The IBJ Media Podcast Network is the soundtrack of a growing state. Indiana is on the move, and you can hear it happening on the IBJ Media Podcast Network. We bring you the voices at the center of our economy, our courts, our companies, and our communities. Subscribe now and be part of the conversation that's building Indiana's future. Find all of our shows by searching IBJ Media in your podcast app or visit ibjpodcasts.com.